And we're joined here in the studio by our international affairs editor, Robert Parsons, also by commentator and feminine activist Ines Shevchenko. Thank you both for being here. Rob, let me just begin with you. Before we talk about Moscow and what relations with Russia, it's clear that the number one factor was a protest vote against corruption.
Yeah, I think not even as specific as that, I don't think. I think people were just fed up. You know, Ukrainians have had it one government after another. I mean, they're not just talking about the last 5 years. This is decades almost now for Ukrainians that they've put up with governments and presidents that have persistently failed them. So as much as anything, it's that. But corruption too, yeah, of course. With Poroshenko, he promised when he came to power 5 years ago, we'll do it in a new way now. He hasn't. He's had ample opportunities. He invited, remember the Georgian president, ex-Georgian president, Mikhail Saakashvili to Ukraine, sent him to be governor of Odessa, and then pulled the rug from under him. So instead of helping him deal with corruption, he pulled the rug from beneath him. People have just had enough, I think, and that's what showed. I don't think this was a great vote in favor of Zelensky. For me, it just looked like, you know, the least rotten apple in the barrel.
What have we been able to glean from the initial statements that he made in his victory speech?
Well, he clearly, first of all, we don't have any idea at all what he's going to do next. But we got a few indications. He is quite clearly determined to crack down on corruption, cutting the link between the presidency and the judiciary in particular, one of the main sources of corruption in the past. But how determined is he to do that? Well, this is really the question. He's so closely associated, at least in many people's minds, with the oligarch Igor Kolomoisky. The people will be watching him extremely closely on that. Remember, just a week ago, a Kiev court ruled that a decision on the nationalization of Kolomoisky's bank, Privatbank, one of the biggest, if not the biggest in Ukraine, should be reversed. So what's he going to do about that? What's his position going to be about that? And if he starts favoring one oligarch over the others, then you could be sure there will be massive resistance from the other oligarchs to any sort of reforms he tries to introduce.
It sounds a little bit like it's going to be difficult to do any kind of reform, especially when your former boss at that TV station is one of those oligarchs.
You know, I will confess that it's a ridiculously uncomfortable situation to come here and to try to explain what a comedian who suddenly became a president of Ukraine will do as a politician. I absolutely have no idea, same as I think he has no idea of what he's going to do, really. But I think that if we really analyze and talk about what really happened yesterday in Ukraine and what this vote meant, then it's no longer ridiculous. It's getting much more serious and even more inspiring for me as a Ukrainian who lives in exile. I will remind you that in 2014, Ukrainians kicked out dictator Yanukovych from the country. He ran away from the people. Yesterday, they kicked out another oligarch. So yesterday's vote is a continuation of people's revolt against this old system. And I try to understand this vote, and I would say that, well, yesterday people said that they rather prefer to be laughed at than to continue to be robbed, than to continue to be humiliated, than to continue to live in poverty. As to Zelensky himself as a candidate, it was sad. It's very unclear what he's going to do and whether any reforms are possible. Today, his advisors announced that one of the first reforms they're going to do is stripping immunity from the president, parliamentarians, and judges. He also only said that he's willing to have a dialogue with Russia and with pro-Russian separatists who occupy and stage the war in the east of Ukraine. But at the same time, he really, as a candidate, he ran with providing no specifics at all. And I think this really played a very important part in his victory. His candidacy was sort of a blank piece of paper on which people could project a lot of various expectations. And obviously, in a very soon future, whether he will do good or bad, even if he will do really good, many people will be deceived because he didn't offer anything specific yet. We do not know. So many people have various hopes on this candidate.
Ukraine is home to Europe's only active war zone at this point in time. Is there a window of opportunity for him, or is he in any case too weak to cut a deal on his own with the Russians?
I will tell you honestly that today is very difficult to imagine someone like Zelensky, fixing the problems and the issue in the east of Ukraine. And of course, we should not forget the Crimea, the annexed Crimea as well. The only thing he said was that he's willing to have a dialogue. But many Ukrainian people already have a hostile attitude towards this statement to have a dialogue, because of course many suggested that such an inexperienced politician could easily become again a puppet in Putin's hands, in Kremlin's hands.
Yeah, because one analysis I read said either way Russia wins before the vote. Is that true?
I was also thinking that when I was watching debates of the two candidates, which are very chaotic, when I was observing yesterday's results, of course, with a very great anxiety, I received those results. And I first thought, well, probably people in Kremlin are really enjoying, and Putin is probably enjoying everything that happens today. But then I read a lot of comments, long articles, blogs of Russian people who indeed say we're envying what's happening in Ukraine and we're getting inspired. So I think that this can be actually a trouble for Putin.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with the second point you're making there. I don't think Putin's very happy about this. It's interesting that today's Russian media do seem to be happy in the same way that they were happy when Donald Trump was elected president of the United States, and then a year later started to think, maybe we got this wrong. I think that's exactly the same here with Zelensky as well. Once they realized who he is, this is a man who speaks predominantly in Russian, who's quite capable of communicating directly with the Russian people on social media, and probably will do at some stage. And he's just been elected in a very open election. Russians are watching that, and they will be, as you mentioned, they are impressed by it. It's an open, free, fair election which people expressed their views, and the incumbent lost and went away without complaining about it. In fact, congratulated the winner. In Russia, you don't see any of that sort of thing. So I'm absolutely sure that the establishment in the Kremlin will be looking at this and thinking, we've got to be careful how we handle this. We don't want it to become infectious.
Just one final question about the geography of the vote. The one area that voted for Poroshenko is the part that's in the far west near the border with Poland. Why is that?
Well, I think that rather why everybody else didn't vote for Poroshenko. Indeed, there is a big, big deception and very clear statement that people are making. We do not want the old rotten system. We do not want to be run by oligarchs. And, people abroad, Ukrainians abroad, predominantly voted for Poroshenko. Yet those people who live in the country, who are really affected by everything that is done, by the reforms, by the corruption again, in the country, they do not want it anymore. And, I think that if we look at the map, it's an impressive win for Zelensky. But indeed, I would say that it's Ukrainian people who won this time. It's Ukrainian democracy who is winning right now. With a great anxiety that I'm having about this president, which is really, once again, a very ridiculously uncomfortable situation for me to comment it. Yet I do understand that this vote and this map, which is giving predominantly the vote for Zelensky, it's really a win for Ukrainian democracy and Ukrainian people.
It's the first time, I think, that in the post-Soviet Ukraine that you've seen the country united regionally in that way, with the exception of Lviv. But I think perhaps one of the reasons why Lviv voted with Poroshenko is it is the most nationalist part of Ukraine. And he campaigned on the slogan of faith, language, and army. All ideas which appeal to people, particularly in Western Ukraine. I think probably that may have been what did it for him. And suspicion on their part that perhaps Zelensky wasn't the man to be commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian army at a time which is effectively at war with Russia.
Robert Parsons, Inna Shevchenko, many thanks for joining us here on France 24.